seeking dual citizenship or residency has been in the spotlight. Now, they feel it may provide more benefit and also privileges for them and their families if they are able to do this. Now, these benefits include the ease of travel, security for the future, and also expansion of business and banking opportunities. So, to talk to us more about the red tape regarding insurance of such endeavours, I'm joined now by Christelle Colman, Managing Director of Elite Risk Acceptances, and she joins me from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town. Christelle, good morning.
Good morning.
So first and foremost, what are these wealthy people saying? What is ultimately the one pertinent factor that prompts them to seek dual citizenship?
I think, it's very difficult for me to have a very specific opinion about this. I think what you've mentioned just now is what's driving the behavior. The opportunity to spread your, investment portfolio from a property investment perspective, possibly a fear of political turmoil, whatever. I think it comes down to the individual on what drives that decision. But it does introduce certain insurance implications. And I think that's the topic that we'd like to tackle this morning, is just how do you insure when you live in more than one country?
So how do you go about that? Because how does insurance work if, you do have dual citizenship? What are the benefits, the pros and the cons of that?
Well, I think the first and most important consideration is the language barrier. Insurance is a very complicated topic as it is, and we battle even just in South Africa to understand what insurance policies are about. So now imagine you've got a house in South Africa and possibly one in Spain. So it's really important that you get in contact with individuals who can give you good advice on your risk exposures and make sure that you've got the correct insurance and that you understand what the legislation and, what the contract reads about in the specific country where you are insuring. Because this is very important. If you are a South African citizen and you have a dual citizenship, let's say with Mauritius, for instance, or any of the other countries on the African continent, you can't insure those assets in South Africa. You have to insure your South African property in South Africa, and you have to insure your other property in the other country under that country's laws, under that insurance, those insurance offerings. So it makes it rather complicated.
One can imagine, because you sitting on one end of the world and your assets may be elsewhere in the world. And as you say, it's difficult when you are right here and having to look after whatever insured property you have. How much more complicated when it's elsewhere where you don't have daily access to actually take a look at what's going on?
Yes, and we also have to think about the individuals traveling backwards and forwards. So it's really important to make sure that you've got the correct travel insurance in place. And nowadays, South Africans tend to send their children overseas to study at universities, all across the world. And again, ensuring that those individuals are adequately insured from an assets protection perspective, the stuff that they have with them, but also medical emergencies, travel insurance solutions. So it's really important considerations, because if something goes wrong when you're very far away from home, or your child is having a medical emergency, you have to have the right insurance coverage in place to make sure that you get it sorted.
So you touched on medical insurance, travel insurance, but what do you find are some of the most overlooked assets that people maybe forget or are just not aware that they ought to be paying attention to insuring when they have assets elsewhere?
The point that I would like to raise is, from a South African perspective, we have many foreigners who buy property in South Africa, who own lovely homes in the Western Cape and all over the country. And they underestimate the impact of the rand-dollar exchange rate. Specifically, if we look at exotic cars or any item that you might buy that's subject to the rand-dollar exchange rate, because those cars are often imported. And if the car's been stolen or involved in a major accident and it's written off, it's often more expensive to replace the specific item as a result of the depreciation of the rand. So for me, whenever we see the rand sort of floundering a little bit, I'm always thinking about these wealthy individuals who've got these very expensive cars and who often don't understand the impact on those assets. So you have to track that on expensive cars, but also on jewelry and expensive jewelry items. It has a significant impact.
And what happens in the instance, Christelle, where someone actually passes on? You know, are your dependents then, do they claim in both countries? How does it work?
You know, there's certain implications when it comes to deceased estates, and you know, under the South African law, you would be able to submit the claims against that estate. And I suppose the same would go for dual citizenship. You would have to submit those claims against the estates in the different territories where it's been registered. So what goes for insurance, I would assume would go for deceased estates as well.
So as we wrap this up, Christelle, you know, again, you spoke about gadgets that we travel with. And we often take it for granted. You know, you hop on a plane to go to a different country, you have your MacBook, your iPhone X and whatever else, and you take it for granted that because it's insured here, you know, you are covered. Is that actually the case, or should there be further coverage for such items?
If you're a South African citizen, you must make sure that you have the right insurance coverage that you take out in South Africa, and that will cover you globally on an international basis. There are specific policies out there that would cover you, and specific policies who cater for the wealth segment as well. So my sort of parting advice this morning is, if you are a wealthy individual who travel a lot, who have dual citizenship, make sure that you've got the correct insurance coverage in place, and make sure that you get in contact with a specialist insurance broker who would be able to assist you with specialist insurance options and underwriters that could make sure that you've got that you are adequately insured if something goes wrong, that you sort it out 100%.
Christelle, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for coming through this morning. And that, of course, Christelle Colman, a Managing Director of Elite Risk Acceptances. And it's amazing how every time, you know, we have a conversation with Christelle or other insurance brokers, that you learn how underinsured we often are, because it just got me thinking, I didn't